Welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in to yet another riveting and timely EMET webinar. Today, we are really honored to have with us Rabbi Yishai Fleischer, who has been an amazing figure in Israel. He has represented the communities of Hebron. He has his own podcast, and Voice of Israel. He has had columns in the New York Times and myriad publications throughout the world. While here in the United States, all of our attention is being focused on the death of George Floyd and the protests that devolved into riots throughout the country and COVID-19. In Israel, they have COVID-19, but of course, the state of Israel always has their own unique issues to contend with. As you know, President Trump came out with his vision for peace and prosperity, which EMET had endorsed. And within Israel, it is very riveting, to say the least. Of course, among the left, but also among the right. On top of that, we had originally planned this for Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. And at exactly 53 years ago, by the Gregorian calendar, Israelis were digging graves because Egypt had amassed massive troops in the Sinai Peninsula and had closed off the Straits of Tiran, and Israel had no choice but to go to war, as they knew that Egypt was planning to attack them. And 6 miraculous days shook the world back in 1967. So here we are, exactly 53 years to the day today, before the Kotel, or the Western Wall, and the tomb of the patriarchs, the matriarchs were liberated in 1967. And here to talk to us about those riveting events that began 53 years ago and has its earth-shattering consequences up until this very day is none other than Rabbi Yishai Fleischer. It's a great honor for you to speak with us, Yishai. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, EMET. It is really, really fun to be with you guys and all the participants. I see there's a lot right now. That's really neat. And happy 53 years since the Six-Day War, Sarah. I want to tell you that I just saw a tweet by my frenemy. I have a frenemy who is a Palestinian activist in Hebron, where I work as spokesman, and he writes, Israel's ethnic cleansing of Palestine was ongoing as it is to this day. So on the 53rd anniversary of the Nakba, you're kindly invited to express your solidarity with the Palestinian people. So you can see that we are continuously fighting this battle because right now that is perceived very differently. I perceive it as a day of liberation, of the return of the Jewish people to our ancestral homeland, to the core cities that make up our identity. And it was a great day of celebration. Some Palestinian activists, not all, see this as a day which is akin to the Nakba, the catastrophe. The Nakba is kind of yet another catastrophe that took place in their mind. I think that before we get to the Six-Day War, we have to put it a little bit in perspective. Oh, there's my map behind me. You know what? Hold on. Let me get my map. It's right here. There it is. So the map is always close by to me. This is the land of Israel. This is the land of Israel. It's on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, and you see here, down here is the Sinai Desert, and Egypt is going to be over here. Up here is Lebanon, and above it's Syria. And we have here the Transjordan, or also known as Jordan, and these are areas that Jewish people traditionally have been connected to from about 3,800 years ago from the stories of the Bible. The stories of the Bible took place here. Now, you can believe in the Bible or not believe in the Bible. Some people, they hear the word Bible or the word Torah, their eyes just glaze over. I find that when I speak with my European friends, they simply don't even want to hear the word because they think it's just hocus pocus, which is fine. You don't have to believe in it, and we don't have to talk about it theologically, but it is important to understand that these cities, the cities that are here, and we'll talk about this high ground right here on this topographical map, they make up the core identity of the Jewish people. Our stories, our lore happen here, in our mind. And you don't have to believe it, but you have to believe that we believe it. We self-identify as the children of the people who walked on this land 3,800 years ago. And I work for a town, we're going to see some pictures in a second, where Abraham purchased, according to the biblical story, purchased a plot of land that was going to be a burial a place for his beloved wife, Sarah. You're named after her. Sarah Stern, you're named after the original Sarah. And so Abraham wanted to bury his beloved wife, and he bought a sepulcher from the Hittites, and he bought it for 400 silver coins, silver weight. And that became a burial plot for the founders and the fathers and the mothers, not just the fathers and the mothers. Unlike, for example, Mount Rushmore, where you see four white American presidents, what you see in the tomb of the fathers and mothers is fathers and mothers 2 by 2 buried there, and really that's because they came together in love in order to build a Jewish family and a Jewish nation. So it's the beginnings of nationhood. Now, the Jewish people were exiled from the land of Israel about 2,000 years ago by the Romans. In the end of the Second Temple period, there was 2 commonwealths that stood right here in the heart of Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, in the heart of it is the Old City, and in the Old City, in the middle there, is the Temple Mount. We'll see some pictures of it in a second. 2 temples stood there. This is common historical knowledge. You could look it up in Wikipedia. And around the year 70 AD, or CE, as we say, the Second Temple was destroyed. Jews were out of the land for about, well, they weren't actually kicked out of the land in toto in the year 70. Rather, they moved up north to this part of the land of Israel, to the Galilee and the Golan Heights. They lived there. They wrote their very essential texts, the Mishnah, the Talmud. Very important tracts were written up there, the Jerusalem Talmud. But Jews were actually kicked out in the year 500 by Byzantium, and then especially when the Arab conquest came in 637, the land just became fallow. It was impossible to continue to live in the land of Israel, and they migrated. They migrated out to the Arab countries, if it's Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, very famously, or to European countries, Spain, France, Germany, and later on Poland. So the Jews went out of the land of Israel. They were kicked out of the land of Israel. Now, in about the year, there's a magic year for American history and Jewish history as well. The year is 1492. It's a magic year. Because 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. I heard all of you guys. So you had a situation where the new world was found. But what people don't know is that the old world was being destroyed. The Jews had a fabulous life in Spain, actually in Muslim Spain, but the Reconquista and Isabel and Ferdinand basically evicted their Jews. Later on, the Portuguese are going to evict their Jews, and whatever Jews stayed, they went under the Inquisition. 1492. Well, that's what you know. You probably know about that. But what you don't know is that the Ottoman Turks were excited to have the Jews in their empire. Why? They said Jews are good for governance, they're good for business, spread them around the empire. They pick up Jews in 1492 on ships. They're like, you don't want your Jews? We'll take them. It's like a garage sale. Got some Jews, pick them up, bring them to the Ottoman Empire. Well, magically, in the year 1517, the Ottomans capture the land of Israel. And Jews living in places like Istanbul are like, hey, this is great. We live in, we are Turkish citizens or subjects. We can move down to the Holy Land, which is where all Jews want to live, and be protected by the Ottomans. And so indeed they go down. They go down and they start to build up their life there. Well, in about 1550, there's a very important person that comes in. He's a rabbi, and his name is the Arizal. And basically, he sends out a call to Jews. And I'm not going to get into exactly how that went down, but he sends out a call to Jews saying, I want you to study the mystical doctrine, again, the Kabbalah, and I also want you to come back to the land of Israel. And his students are going to bring more and more people. The 1500s weren't easy years, but about 200 years later, from the teachings of this rabbi, the Arizal, There are the Hasidic Aliyah, the Gaon Mivilna, the famous genius of Vilna. He brings his folks to the land of Israel, and so too another rabbi called the Or HaChaim from the Sephardi countries. And Jews start coming in. The real Zionism starts, the modern day Zionism, push for Zionism, starts in the middle of the 1700s. That's the real truth. And so this first Aliyah is a religious Aliyah. But then there's going to be a development of a more secular type of Aliyah, based also on the pogroms that are happening in Poland and in Russia. And a guy named Herzl comes on the scene. He puts it all together. There's a lot of people already speaking Hebrew, wanting to go back. There's already communities in the land of Israel, but he puts it all together. He says it's time to try to go for a state. And he goes on a political kind of journey to the Turkish Sultan, to the German Kaiser, and he's going around all the hallways of power, and he's trying to secure this idea of a state of Israel or a protectorate amongst these other empires. Later on, another magic year is the year 1917. 1917, the World War I is coming to an end. It's coming towards an end. And the British have a lot of Jews living inside their country, and they're going through their own movement. Their movement is a Christian movement. We would call it today a kind of conservative movement, where they are seeing that it's important to help the Jewish people come back to the land of Israel for various reasons. One is a Christian restoration. We believe that if the Bible will come true if the Jews are ingathered into the land. But that wasn't the only reason. There was another Christian motivation. Some of them felt that the Christians had been bad to the Jews, and this is our way to fix it. Let's protect the Jews. They're in such trouble in the East and Russia. Let's help them. But there was more realpolitik reasons as well. They wanted their own kind of friends, the Jews that are like them, to help them hold on to the Suez Canal. And they wanted to make sure that the Russians would stay in World War I, and they thought that the Jews would have an impact on the Russians, on the Russian Jews, and they would have an impact on the Tsar over there. And so the British come up with the idea, with, of course, some prodding from Jewish people working hard in Jewish politics back then in Whitehall, in the halls of British power. And they came up with this amazing thing called the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was basically a declaration of a principle, of an idea that the British Empire would be in favor of reconstituting Jewish presence in the land of Israel. That internal type of document became international law in 1920. In 1920, at San Remo, after the end of World War I, the nations, the principal powers, got together in San Remo, Italy. It was actually in April. We just celebrated 100 years in April towards the end of April in 1920. And they got together and they wanted to figure out what to do with the lands of the Ottomans, which they kind of are dismembering, breaking apart. And of course, the folks who wrote the Balfour Declaration, including Lord Arthur Balfour himself, was in San Remo, pushing hard for the Balfour Declaration to become international law. And indeed, it became international law. The principal powers all agreed to it. And then later on, it was ratified by the full League of Nations. In 1922, the full League of Nations, 56 countries, all said the land of Israel belongs to the Jews. Now, what is the land of Israel, you ask? The answer is it used to include this map. We'll see in a second this map, but also what went over here on this side, which is to the east, which is Jordan, the east bank of the River Jordan. But the British had other interests at that time. They had their friends, the Hashemites. You've heard of them. They continue to rule Jordan today. They used to rule in Iraq. They used to rule in Saudi Arabia. They're no longer there. But they wanted to help their friends. And so they gave them a big chunk of land. But it was clearly understood that all the land west of the Jordan River, that's Palestine. But Palestine meant a Jewish Palestine. Everybody knew that. That was like simple. And if you look at the map, it's really pretty sensical. You see this here it is, this rift, this Jordan Valley Dead Sea Rift. It's a pretty natural border. Everything to the west of that was supposed to be a Palestine, meaning to say a land of Israel for the Jews. Any case, with time, more Palestinians showed up, more Arabs that started demanding this land for themselves, and a different kind of atmosphere came into being at the United Nations. It was no longer the League of Nations. It was no longer San Remo and Balfour and all that. and there was different interests, and there was now oil, which played a big game. And basically, they decided to cut the land of Israel and to make it into the original two-state solution. It wasn't a decision, it was a recommendation. It was their recommendation. The Jewish people were generally against this recommendation, but they were disempowered at the time, and they said, okay, we'll take what we can get. They announced the state in 1948. 1948, Israel is born, but it was born into a horrible war. The war that lasted a year, the War of Independence. And in that year, Israel lost 1% of its population from death from this war. Every house knew somebody that died in the war. It was a great war. But did we win or lose the War of Independence? The answer is we won, because we gained independence. But we also lost the heartland. We lost the heartland of Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank. We lost the Gaza Strip. We lost the Golan Heights. And we were a tiny, indefensible state. And so we lived under tough borders that were easily attacked, indefensible borders, if you will. We lived in indefensible borders for 19 years, from 1948 to 1967. 19 years. I forgot to mention that another of a land lost happened, and that's Jerusalem. Jerusalem was divided. And who is it that took Jerusalem? Well, it was the Jordanians. The Jordanians took the West Bank, which they never had any right to before. Nobody ever claimed that they had previously. There was no legal documents that ever said that Jordan could take the West Bank. But they took it. They were not recognized as a legal sovereign, but they took it, and they took Jerusalem and divided it in half. Well, the Jewish people, 1948 was a tough war. They fought another war in 1956. But finally, as Sarah was saying before, there came a situation where the Egyptian president,
Nasser.
Right, Gamal Abdel Nasser, he thought that this was a great opportunity. And you can watch his speeches on YouTube. He says, we're going to destroy Israel. We're going to throw them into the sea. We're going to have coffee in Tel Aviv. And basically, without any mincing of words, he said, we're going to finish off the work of the Holocaust. This is it. And there were many people in Israel, I think, as you mentioned before, Sarah, that were indeed preparing for such an eventuality. But the Israeli army, with, we believe, the help of God, had a very different perspective. Let's take a look at some pictures for a second about what happened during that war. And that'll give us a little bit of picture. And we're remembering today. First thing, this is a wall, not in Israel, but actually in Phoenix, Arizona at the JCC. I think it's a really fun wall. And it just shows you that, Jews love the land of Israel, even in Phoenix, and they're climbing all over it. Look where this girl who's climbing on the land is. On the her right hand is around where Jerusalem is. And you see that below that is Hebron, Bethlehem, Jericho, Ramallah, and Nablus. We'll talk about them in a second. So these are some of the cities. This was the land that was supposed to be the land of Israel. As you can see, the British mandate for Palestine was supposed to create a state of Israel, and it was supposed to include that Transjordan. Later, that became Jordan. Okay, here's our first glimpse into the effects of the Six-Day War. What happened is that in a kind of sneak attack first strike, Israel struck at the airfields of the Egyptian army and basically destroyed them in the first hours of the war. That set the whole tone. Once Israel dominated the sky, the rest of the war went in Israel's favor. Okay, it says Air Force wins supremacy as army drives Egyptians back into the Sinai and Gaza, and later they're going to capture the Sinai and the Gaza. All right, here's the land of Israel, kind of from our perspective, upside down, but you could see it. You could see the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba. Those are part of the Red Sea, and the one closer to us up in the upper left part of the screen, that's where the bottom of the state of Israel is today, Eilat. You can see also the shiny body of water is that famous Dead Sea. You could also see a little bit more to the bottom right of the screen, the Lake of Galilee, the famous Kinneret. Now, this is part of a class that I give a lot of times, is a class called the Seven Holy Cities. And almost all of these seven holy cities exist within the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. The reason I say holy, I could switch the word holy to historical anytime. People who don't like the word holy because it's not their bag to think religion and God or Bible, that's totally fine, because there's another way to say it, which is indigeneity, history. And these cities are the cities that make up the core of Jewish identity. So we start at the very bottom, the south part of the land of Israel, and it's really the capital of the desert. It's a town called Beer Sheva. It's a very biblical town. Abraham taught here, and he set up kind of shop here, and so did Isaac. And today it's the capital of the Negev, and also becoming the capital of the Israeli army. All of its bases are moving to the town of Beer Sheva. Next town, a little bit up the mountain, is called Hebron. That's where I work, or I have the great honor of working, because that's where the tombs of the fathers and mothers of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah are found, and a lot of history there. And I didn't mention one matriarch, and that's the matriarch Rachel. That's because she's buried in a separate place. If you go up just a little bit north, it's Bethlehem or Beit Lechem, and its kind of other name is Ephrat. Right now, as I'm broadcasting to you, I am sitting in Ephrat, right next to Bethlehem. I share an exit with Bethlehem, Arab Bethlehem, and of course the shrine of the tomb of Rachel is there. Go up a little bit more and you get to Jerusalem, Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh. Jerusalem is the capital, the heart of the Jewish people. It's we call it Jerusalem DC, or Jerusalem David's capital. It is a city that is very ancient. By the way, not as ancient as like Hebron. It's a few years younger than places like Hebron. Hebron is 4,500 years old, with Jewish presence there 3,800 years ago. Jerusalem, a tad younger maybe, but then other people will tell you that's not true. But in any case, Jerusalem is where King David built his first capital. We call it Jerusalem DC, Jerusalem David's capital, and 2 temples stood there. And today it is the capital of Israel once again. Now we'll go north into Samaria, and we get into a place called Bethel. How many places in the world are named Bethel? Bethel churches, Bethel synagogues, Bethel, Pennsylvania. Why? Because the word Bethel is a word that religious people like very much. It means the house of God. So when you're building a church and you're like, this place is a house of God, so you call it Bethel. Next up is Shiloh or Shiloh, and that is a place where the tabernacle stood for hundreds of years. It's got a beautiful flat plain there that you could see really where 1 million Jews could camp around it. And then you have the town of Shechem. Now I'm going to teach you something that you may not know. I said Shechem. You may have said, Gesundheit, but Shechem means, Shechem is the name of this town, but you will a lot of times find it called Nablus. Why is it called Nablus? Because Nablus means Neapolis. It's a Roman word, Neapolis. Neapolis is actually Neopolis, new city. My Arab cousins don't pronounce the word, the letter P. They pronounce it B, so it became Nablus. But it is Shechem, Neapolis. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so 6-Day War is here's a trick question. How long was the 6-Day War? The answer is it lasted 6 days. And within that 6 days, the Jewish people, in our mind, liberated and did not occupy. And by the way, we'll get to it in question and answers. I think the core question today that we're dealing with is liberation or occupation. That's the core question, right? And I as a thinker, I like to think of myself as a thinker. I like to reduce a lot of times to simpler phrases, because I find that sometimes over sophisticated phrases kind of make us misunderstand the bottom line. The bottom line is, was the 6-Day War liberation or occupation? It's one or the other. Either we stole somebody else's land and we entered it, we took it over and we're occupiers, or we liberated our ancestral homeland. Clearly, I'm the kind of person, and I represent a group of people that believe that we liberated our own ancestral homeland. Here is the Israeli army on the Temple Mount. You recognize the Golden Dome, which is not a mosque, but is the Dome of the Rock over the place where most archaeologists believe was the Holy of Holies, or the foundation stone that was at the heart of 2 temples in Jerusalem. Today, there's this golden mosque over it. All right, here's another picture of it. There's a troop carrier on the Temple Mount itself. Famous Rabbi Golan. He was the chief of the army and also a general. I think of him as a very biblical type figure. Here he is blowing the shofar, which is a Jewish kind of horn. Not a Jewish horn, but a horn that the Jews use. And he's at the Western Wall. Now, the Western Wall, we'll see in a second some more. Here it is, the Western Wall. The Western Wall is a very important place for Jewish history. Jews have been praying close to the Temple Mount from really since the destruction of the temple for the last 2,000 years. But in the year 1655, they began to pray at the Western Wall as their like spot, their synagogue, if you will, outdoors of being close to the temple. So the Western Wall has a special place for the Jewish people. Here's the paratroopers. I myself am also an IDF paratrooper, and it's good to see the guys, although they're much older than me, liberating the Western Wall Plaza. And the Western Wall Plaza was in the hands of the Jordanians. Understand that Jordan captured Jerusalem and the whole old city, ethnically cleansed every Jew from the old city, including destroying the 55 synagogues there, and did not let Jews come to the Western Wall or the Temple Mount. That's why look at these guys' faces. The faces are of liberators. All right, here's a great picture of what happens today in Jerusalem when there are big major events. Everybody comes to the Western Wall Plaza. You can see all those people there are at the Western Wall Plaza. And above them, to the upper right, is the Temple Mount. Now, I'm the kind of Jew who goes up onto the Temple Mount and murmurs words there because today you're not allowed to pray. Strangely, the Israeli government upholds the laws of the Waqf, which is the Islamic trust, which really believe in jihadist ideas that Jews shouldn't be on the Temple Mount and are threatened by us. And so we're not allowed to pray up there. But here we are at the Western Wall. It's lit up there. But of course, our hearts are towards the Temple Mount. All right, here's another picture of those paratroopers liberating the Western Wall. All right, here's a big shot of all the people praying. Here's how this is read by the Hamas movement. This is their Twitter account, which has been closed recently. Thousands of fanatic Israeli settlers, that means regular people, broke into the Al-Aqsa compound and occupied Jerusalem last night and desecrated the Al-Burak Wall. The Al-Burak Wall is the renaming of the Western Wall in what I call, we'll talk about it a little later, narrative war, the effort to erase the Jewish and Israeli history of the place. Okay, the other way to read this is different, which is 100,000 Jews gathered for a special kind of prayer at the Western Wall. All right, look at this. This is a picture that was, this was a big poster that was put up by by Hamas, actually the Muslim Brotherhood, on the Temple Mount during Ramadan last year, not this year. This year was COVID Ramadan, so nobody was on the Temple Mount, but you could see Muhammad Morsi on the bottom right there, one of the famous leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood, who was for a while the president of Egypt. But you could see that they are very much about holding on and, in their mind, liberating the Temple Mount. This is a 2,000-year-old staircase that leads from the Siloam pool. And this is the world's most important half mile. And I think maybe you had Zev Orenstein here, Sarah, he probably explained this. This was how Jews walked up to the Temple Mount from the Siloam pool when they came 3 times a year. Now it's being dug out, and this is an amazing underground passage. There's a big giant neighborhood on top of it, but the folks at City of David are connecting us to how life was 2,000 years ago. This is a picture that I took recently. This is a picture of an Arab neighborhood, practically where that tunnel was, just a little bit to the east of it. But this is an Arab neighborhood during Ramadan. Now, the Arabs have, the Muslim Arabs have taken upon themselves to use Christmas lights to mark Ramadan, which is really cool. But notice that there's 3 Jewish stars within this neighborhood of Silwan. Those Jewish stars are Jews, Israelis, that choose to live in Arab neighborhoods in order to hold on to property that used to belong to Jews, and belongs to Jews once again, and they are so-called settlers. Jews who are willing to live in tough places in order to assert our right to property and land. All right, this picture doesn't belong here. This is more of the 6-Day War. You could see that some of the liberators, the Israeli soldiers, are carrying a picture of King Hussein upside down. This is, by the way, recently only found this picture. Never seen it before. If you look in the back, you'll see very clearly that there's the Mount of Olives because there's the Augusta Victoria Church, a Lutheran church that's at the top of Mount of Olives. Okay, now let's get to another city. We talked about Jerusalem, of course, that's the heart of it all in the 6-Day War, but another very important place is Hebron, which is the sister city of Jerusalem. And here is Rabbi Goran putting up a makeshift flag on the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, which we've talked about before. Okay, here's one of the most wonderful people in Israel, to myself, with I Heart Hebron. This is actually in the Arab part of Hebron. but I took this picture. This is the famous building. This is the Tomb of the Fathers and Mothers, or the Tomb of Patriarchs and Matriarchs. We like to call tombs of the mamas and the papas. And really, it's a Herodian building. It's a Herodian building. Herod, King Herod 2,000 years ago, very famous guy, had a lot of issues. Killed his wife, put her in honey for 3 years, talked to her, a lot of weird stuff. But he was a master builder. And this building is the only one of his monumental structures that is intact completely and has never been destroyed. And that maybe is something to do with the magic of the fathers and mothers. But this building has only been added onto. The original Herodian structure stands. All right, you can see here that a lot of people show up, including soldiers who do their swearing in ceremonies. This is my daughter's class that came to receive we studied Bible in school, the Torah. They came to receive their book of Genesis right next to the stars of the book of Genesis, which are the fathers and mothers. All right, we try to keep it lively. This is how we do it at night in order to keep people coming. This is a beautiful picture. Just like the Jerusalem picture, I just wanted to show you how attracted Jews are to this place. And by the way, not only Jews, and we'll see in a second, non-Jews from all over the world come and are part of the 1.5 million tourists that we have every single year at the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs in Hebron. This is a picture that I took, and I deserve the Pulitzer Prize for this picture. Okay, and I have not been awarded anything because this is a beautiful picture in my mind, one of my favorites, because what you're seeing here is daughters of Israel being blessed by their fathers under a canopy, a traditional prayer shawl canopy, and right above it is the tomb of the fathers and mothers, as though they too are sending their blessings to the children. That's what Hebron's really about. It's about Jewish peoplehood and continuity. But as I promised you, it is not only Jews. Before Corona, this group of Chinese visitors, in this case, they're Chinese evangelical Christians, came, and I said to them, how many more of you are there? They said, only 100 million. So I'm looking forward to them getting back and being tourists in the place. Here are some Indians. And what is exactly their connection is, I'm not sure. But they're into it, and they let me take this picture. Really nice folks. And as I said to you, really, we are if we Jews were Christians, and the Jews of Hebron would be called Knights of the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs, or Knights of the Machpelah. That's the Hebrew word for this monument. And there you go. Sarah's buried there. This is her marker. Right across the way is Abraham, and that's his marker. And there are actual two markers in the building. They're 2,000-year-old markers. All right, I'm going quickly only because I want to get to your questions. We have a lot of soldiers that come and visit this place and tour. These guys are not on duty. They're just checking out the place. They're just having a tour. All right, these are actually parents of the soldiers, of officers coming to join them. And I thought, what would be more beautiful than showing soldiers, Israeli soldiers, with their parents at the Tomb of the Mothers and Fathers. All kind of folks show up. You know, East meets West. This is our former Minister of Justice, Ayelet Shaked. And here she is in Hebron. And I'll never forget this, one of the most amazing moments of my life. She stood in front, I was filming her to take a short video, and she said, I'll never forget this. She said, as the Minister of Justice for the State of Israel, I declare that the story in the Bible, now she's not perceived that as very religious. She's certainly respectful, traditional, but not observant. She says, I affirm that the story in the Bible, the Torah, of the purchase of the Tomb of the Fathers and Mothers is legal doctrine. I say this as the Minister of Justice for the State of Israel. There she is. She's wearing actually a sweatshirt that says 50 Hebron, because we were celebrating 50 years of renewal. A lot of you might know this man. His name is Michael Oren, a great author and former Israeli ambassador to the United States and a friend. Nir Barkat comes around. That's the former mayor of Jerusalem. I like to take pictures, and so this French lady was willing to let me take a shot of her at the Paratroopers. I think it says Zionism. Okay, this is Prime Minister Netanyahu, and when he saw me, he got really excited and asked me to take a selfie with him. All right, maybe that's not the way it went down. Maybe it's more like I asked him, but I caught him in a rare smiley moment. He was in Hebron with his wife, honoring the memory of the 1929 massacre. Every 10 years, we have a major ceremony there, and he came to remember the 67 Jews that were murdered and the rights of Jews to return. Here's the president of Israel with our mayor. Okay, and some of you might know some of these folks. This is Mark Levin. He's wearing the Make Hebron Great Again hat there. Okay, this is Governor Scott Walker. He was visiting us. He's a friend. This is Mike Huckabee. Some of you will know him. And Ben Shapiro came to pray at the tomb of the fathers and mothers. Again, he asked me to take a selfie. I obliged him. And Pete Hegseth from Fox was recently with us in Hebron, came out with a great special. Hebron has many more sites. I don't think I have time to talk about it, but this is a synagogue that was built in 1550, and it's there. We found seals from 2,900 years ago. In which language do you think they say the words, to the king Hebron? Is it Ugaritic, Phoenician, Babylonian? No. The language that we found it in was Hebrew. From the Hezekiah period, 2,900 years ago, we found 5 of these seals. All right, I'm not going to go through all of this, just to show you that we also try to have a real happy life there. Yes, it is a community that is surrounded by an Arab community. We have, we'll see in a second, some excellent friends in the Arab side, but we also have some non-friends, including a strongly Hamas-held city that is ruled today by a mayor by the name of Tiasir Abu Snena, who's one of the people who organized the murder of 6 Jews in a 1980 attack. He is the same guy. How do we know? Because he makes videos boasting about it. So we know that. But I want to tell you that what you may not know is that we also have, amongst the conflicts that we also have excellent relations with some of our Arab brothers and sisters, our cousins. And this is an amazing, amazing, amazing photo. And I'm so proud that you could see me third from the right over there. And this is an iftar meal. We're having a meal post-Ramadan. Every 30 of the 30 days, they have a big meal in the evening after sunset. And this is at an Arab chieftain's house, the guy in the middle. His name is Haj Ashraf Jabri, and he's a great friend. And we had an iftar meal. Now, you wonder what we ate there. Well, Haj Ashraf wanted to make sure that we would enjoy ourselves, so he catered it kosher. It was catered kosher from the Jewish community next door, Kiryat Arba. He catered it, and we all came in. And I want you to see that my hands, you see me a third from the right there, you see that I have my hands on a guy there, standing there in an open jacket. His name is Khaldun Husseini. Khaldun Husseini. Khaldun Husseini is from the famous Husseini clan. The Husseini clan were the people that brought us much, 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 much terror and bloodshed and anti-Israel hate. I said to him, wait a minute, who is Haj Amin al-Husseini to you? And he goes, it's my great-grandfather. So the guy that destroyed Jewish Hebron in 1929, his great-grandson is today a Jerusalem businessman who is looking for ways to find harmony and coexistence with Jews. I asked him, I said to him, what's the deal? You're a Husseini. Where's the war? He said, we're done with that. We're done with that. We see that you Jews are here, that you're not going anywhere. We accept you. You're our cousins, and we're on a different path. Those old timers are gone. That's what he said. Notice this is Arabs walking past an Israeli soldier. The guy on the right there is an Israeli soldier from the Nachal Brigade. And look at these Arab kids. They're just waving to him. They're waving to him. They're being nice to him. And that is actually the normal life of Hebron. But the activists and the folks that are getting paid by the Palestinian Authority to incite, of course, would like to sow hate between Jews and Arabs, but it's not the natural modality. All right, a very important picture here. This is not me having a great idea, but rather it's a picture of something that happened very recently. I had a bat mitzvah, which means a celebration for my daughter's coming of age. And in my family, we love fireworks. We love fireworks. And so, especially for big events, for big occasions. So my mom said to me, I hope you have fireworks for your daughter's bat mitzvah. You know, and she's a Jewish mom. She means business. So I try to, pay money for Jewish fireworks experts to come down and shoot fireworks, but the army wouldn't let me do it, and the bureaucracy wouldn't let me do it, and the cost was high, and the guy wouldn't do it. It was just a mess. Suddenly, I came up with an idea that nobody had come up with in Hebron before. I turned to my Arab friends in Arab Hebron. I said, wait a minute, you guys are great at fireworks. You shoot fireworks all the time. You know them. You understand them. And nobody gives you a hard time. Will you shoot some fireworks for my daughter's bat mitzvah? They said, what? I said, can you procure and shoot fireworks for my daughter's bat mitzvah? They're like, okay. Anyway, I'm cutting the long story short. They fired off profound, beautiful fireworks. For 10 minutes, this stuff went off. And they only charged me for the fireworks themselves, which was much cheaper than on the Jewish side. And they wouldn't charge me for any work because they were honored by the fact that I let them be part of my simcha, my joyous occasion. And I was honored by the fact that they were part of it. And we have that bond forever. This is an amazing picture that I took. Nobody can guess what this picture means because you could never guess it. The answer is that we were sitting, Arabs and Jews, together in Hebron in order to talk about joint economic ventures. And I said, guys, we need a picture. We need a picture to show that we are cooperating. And people said to me, of course, because they're afraid of the Palestinian Authority would find them and would hurt them because the Palestinian Authority is deadly against normalization. They said, we can't take a picture. I said, we got to take some kind of picture. And I came up with this idea. I said, stick your hands out, everybody. Now, you're in a room. There's like 4 Arabs, 4 Jews, and there was a Christian guy there as well. And they're all grown men and serious business guys. And you go, put your hands over the table and take a picture. Everybody's like, what? And I'm like, just trust me here. And the people said, okay. And that's the picture. I think this is a beautiful picture of breaking bread and cooperation. And the only thing is you have to trust me that it's not fake hands, but what I tell you. Around Israel, when you're driving, you'll find signs like these that say, I was coming from the beach, that's why I'm wet. And I'm saying there's a picture towards the tomb of the fathers and mothers. Notice it's symbolized as both a synagogue and a mosque. All right, this is a kind of final picture that we took recently during the rains. Oh, I guess I have one more. All kinds of people show up. These are Aish women. And when Jewish people and other people are not afraid to come and visit, they really get to connect. One of the narratives is that the place is scary and dangerous. That's a narrative that there are interested parties in making that a narrative so that people would be disconnected from these places. And I reject that narrative of fear. And that's part of Zionism, is not to be afraid of the bad guys, but to push them back. And we also have our own Harley people in Israel. These guys are called Zion Riders, okay? And they came in recently, and I like this picture. I think it says it all. What do I also have to add? All right, so we went through some of the cities. Maybe we'll go just for a few more, just 2 more minutes on the pictures of these other towns. There they are, the 7 holy cities. This is Jerusalem. Okay, this is the Tower of David. This is a bad picture. Turns out a little bit smaller than I would like. This is the place of the dream of the ladder, where Jacob had his dream of the ladder in Bethel, in Bethel. This is the tomb of Rachel as it used to be in Bethlehem. It's been there for we have Christians from 1800 years ago describing the tomb of Rachel there in Bethlehem, but it's been there for 3,600 years. All right. I'm not going to get into this now, maybe in question and answers. This is the tomb of Joseph in Shechem or Shechem or Nablus. It is just last night was another attempt to destroy it. Today it's under Palestinian Authority control. And wherever the Palestinian Authority controls, it ethnically cleanses. That's just what it does. It has always ethnically cleansed Jews, every single place that it fully controls. There's only one place that it controls that is not ethnically cleansed, and that is Hebron. And that is testament to 2 things. One, the importance of the tomb of the fathers and mothers. And the other thing is it's a testament to the tenacity of the Jews that live there. I get to work for very tenacious folks. All right, we're not going to go through this now. This is in Shiloh. This is the synagogue in Shiloh or Shiloh, which is mimicking the tabernacle that stood there about 3,000 years ago in King David's time. It stood there a little bit before his time. It stood there, and today they made a synagogue that mimics that. Look at the beautiful countryside. All right, this is actually in Iraq, a mock-up of the Temple Mount and a kind of a liberation fight against Israel, destroy Israel and take it over type of exercise that was done there. I love this picture. This is actually one of my favorites. I love this picture because this picture says it all about what the efforts to try to broker pieces or a 2-state solution. The narrative on the other side is not 2-state solution or anything like that. By the way, I do not believe in the 2-state solution. We can talk about that. But the narrative is there is nothing legitimate about Israel at all. And that's why we are actually fighting a war of delegitimization. That's the war. I call it the narrative war. But this picture says everything. everything about Israel is illegal, from A to Z. You guys are white, interlopers, you're not from here, you're occupiers and you're abusers, and there's nothing right about you. You're not Semites, you're not Hebrews, you haven't lived in the Middle East as we have, you're not the children of Abraham. All that stuff is totally forgotten in the war. All right, this action figure can be purchased today in Eastern Jerusalem and also on Amazon. I think it says that the conflict has a goal, and that is to liberate Israel in toto, liberate Jerusalem, and to do it by force of arms. All right, we won't get into this now. This is the peace, the Trump peace plan, and this is the let me rephrase that. That's the peace to prosperity, so-called deal of the century. We could get into that in questions and answers. Let me just stop my screen share here for a second, my friends. How did I do that? Oh, did I stop the screen share, or are you seeing?
We're still seeing that.
Oh, there it is. Here it is. Here it is. Stop share. There you go. Okay, so that was a lot of the history of the Jewish people, and really, I'll just finish off my remarks by saying that the 6-Day War is actually being fought today. We are literally, and I mean, I don't yesterday. I mean today, we are still fighting for the sovereignty over the very land that we liberated or conquered, as depends how you see it, in the 6-Day War. That battle, so what you're seeing in the news, the issues of sovereignty, is exactly what we're still fighting. Those lands that we understand as liberated have still not come under full Israeli control, and that's what we're trying to do. Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, that was phenomenal. It's wonderful and refreshing, especially living here in the nation's capital, to hear some Zionism 101 once again. And if there's anybody that can remind us about what it's all about, it's Yishai Fleischer. So thank you. All right, so I'm going to open up the floor for questions, but as the moderator, I'm going to take the liberty to ask the first question. You realize, I'm sure, that in a matter of 5 months, there's going to be an election here in the United States. And I'm sure you appreciate that President Trump has been amazing towards the state of Israel and is doing something that no other president has done by changing the equation and giving some sort of responsibility or accountability to the Palestinians for having had rejected so many offers, and the response has always been violence. So some agency to them, and it's changing the paradigm by not rewarding bad behavior and going back to the Clinton parameters, and then with Ehud Barak, and even more the Ulmer parameters, which they've used as a baseline. So wouldn't it be appropriate for Israel right now to extend sovereignty over 30% of Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley, as opposed to going back to the days of UN Resolution 2334, which basically has described East Jerusalem, where the Kotel is, as occupied territory, and said that these are illegal, which President Obama did not veto. And as we know, Joe Biden was part of the Obama administration. So do you see any wisdom in that?
Okay, so there was a lot there, Sarah. There was a lot there. So let me try to parse it out just a tad. First thing is that 6-Day War happened, and many of us believed that it was time to go back and live in these places. Other people in the Israeli government believed at the time that the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, were going to be bargaining chips towards peace, and basically offered up this land to get peace with the Arabs. So we had a very big division in how we understand things. And Israel annexed or made or put or spread their sovereignty. I think we we need a new word, by the way, to insovereignize or sovereignitize. I don't know what, but asserted the sovereignty over the Golan Heights in 1982, Jerusalem immediately at the end of the 6-Day War. And people like us have been pushing for a very long time for sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank, because we believe it's the ancestral homeland, and it's also crucial for security. But I'd like to say it in that order. It's our land, it's our ancestral homeland. The world recognized it as such. We won it in wars. We purchased large parts of it, and it's our land. And we need it for security. That's also 100% true. But that's not the rationale for it. With regarding to the Trump administration, I think that it's really hard to understand how many absolutely groundbreaking things the Trump administration has done. Okay, it's hard to fathom. Because, we get used to a new normal so quickly. The Trump administration recognized Jewish sovereignty in the Golan Heights. Moved the embassy to Jerusalem. You, Sarah, have been working on that for 20 years. Okay? And others as well. And finally, that came to fruition. And by the way, all that work paid off. That was, you guys also, you set it up. You set up you did the alley-oop, but it was your work for many years. But he did more than that. He defunded aspects of the Palestinian Authority. He pushed back on the UN. And actually, for me, I had a hand in America's leaving of UNESCO, which is an organization which really was which was a good organization ostensibly, but was erasing Jewish history, claiming that Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron were not Jewish, Temple Mount wasn't Jewish, the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs was actually a Palestinian World Heritage Site. So they left UNESCO because of that. And there are more things, including what I think is one of the most important, which is the Pompeo Doctrine, so-called, which is the recognition that the United States does no longer views Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria as illegal under international law, which is another way to say we see you as being legitimate legal there. The Trump administration has done great things, and there are more, with regarding to the assertion of sovereignty, here here I must say, a sovereign people on a land that they think they're sovereign over should assert sovereignty, and if the United States of America recognizes that, that is fabulous. That is so important, and we certainly need the United States' help at the UN and against European countries and all that kind of stuff. And we have a bond, we have a union. We're allies, more than allies. But it's the Trump administration is saying, look, there's a green light for certain parts of sovereignty. We'll recognize that. Great, but that does not mean that the United States is granting us sovereignty. That's not correct. The United States doesn't have that power to grant us sovereignty. They're not the sovereign here, and nobody can grant you sovereignty. You have to self-determine. And so we're really waiting for the state of Israel, as was done in all the other places that the United States recognized. You've got to take that step. Israel's got to take that step bravely, courageously. Not everybody's going to like it. And then the United States says, if you take that step, we will recognize it. But you've got to make that step. And that's really the period that we've come to.
Great. So now, yes, and the time clock is ticking, both in terms of our hour, but also in terms of when they're supposed to take this to the Knesset on July 1st. So Correct. It's very hot in Israel right now.
Very
so Sarah Leah, would you like to read some of the questions that have come in our remaining time?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Rabbi Fleischer, so much for joining us for the webinar. We've got a few questions in, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to answer all of them, but we'll do our best. So one question, and this could be a brief answer. I
don't do brief answers.
Well,
okay.
We'll see what we can do.
All right, we'll try. Okay.
Could you please describe or explain the term a little bit more in reference to defensible borders? This was specifically in response to, this makes sense when we're talking about tanks rolling in and geographical borders, but when, there's more and more warfare is happening in the air, what a defensible border really means in this context.
Yeah, I like the term. When it comes to defensible borders, I have a sister term for it, which I think is a little bit more descriptive, which is indefensible borders. Indefensible borders means I cannot defend these borders. They will roll down. For example, if you give away the Golan Heights, Syria controls the Golan Heights, they shoot down at you and they roll their tanks down, and therefore it's an indefensible border. So the opposite of an indefensible border is a defensible border. But that's the real problem, is having borders that are indefensible. Now, maybe one of the most important things that I didn't say is that the Middle East, here comes my short answer. The Middle East is a place where a lot of Arab people live. This is their lands. They live in 22 Arab countries, and there are 400 million Arabs. Sadly, for the last 100 years, there's been also an attitude or a theology, or not always a theology, sometimes an ethos of jihadism. Could be religious jihadism or secular jihadism. So Israel is a defensive state. Just to understand that, it is a gun state. It's a state with tanks and jets. And if you're chilling on the beach in Tel Aviv and you're just laying back on the beach, every 15 minutes, a gunship flies over the beach, okay, making sure to patrol those borders. Understand that Israel is a fort, if you will, a defensive country, a safe haven, if you like. And so we cannot have indefensible borders. So we have defensible borders, but that is not but you can't take other people's land because you want defensible borders. You can only take that land if it's your land, or else it's theft or land theft. And so it's very important to understand that we genuinely believe that this is our ancestral homeland, our indigeneity is here. The world recognized it as such. We won it in wars. We purchased it. And if you like, we also have, spiritual biblical promises, if you're into that. But I laid out the term in secular terms, and if you like it in religious terms, that's also doable. But, and certainly I'm an observant man. That's why they give me that title, Rabbi. But I also have a law degree, and we have legal claim as well. So we cannot have indefensible borders because we have a concept which is not a biblical concept, but a modern concept called never again. We will not allow ourselves to be beaten up, and we will not allow ethnic cleansing or genocide to happen to us again. And so therefore we make sure that we don't have indefensible borders.
Thank you. The next question, and this may be the last question, depending on time. What do you propose should be the status of the 2.5 million Palestinians who are living in the West Bank after Israel extends sovereignty over those territories?
Whoever asked that question, I really, really appreciate that question. And I think that not only do I appreciate that, but I think that's the crux of the issue. I think it's the crux of the issue. Now, the assumption within that question, which was framed very nicely, is that we would assert sovereignty over all of Judea and Samaria and Gaza and all that. And that would be great from my perspective. Other people within my camp do not think so. From my perspective, that would be fabulous. But in any case, let's say if you assert the sovereignty they're talking about now, which is on 30%, you're going to have not anywhere near that amount of Arabs or other under your control. But let's still answer the question and not try to, weasel out of it. Let's answer the question. The question should be framed: what is the role of non-Jews in a Jewish state? Now, you have to ask another question before that. What is Israel? Well, I believe it is not so much Jewish and democratic as much it is the ethnic national state of the Jewish people, like Hungary for Hungarians, like Japan for Japanese, like Iceland for Icelanders, et cetera, et cetera. Many countries, if not most in the world, are actually ethnic national states. All the 22 Arab countries around us are ethnic national states. In my mind, Israel is a protectorate for our peoplehood, our ethnicity, called the Jewish people. And its first and foremost job is to protect Jews and give them rights and opportunities to develop their culture. Rights for other minorities is very important. It's guaranteed both in the Balfour Declaration in San Remo and in Israel's Declaration of Independence. But in my opinion, I'm going to say something that is not maybe popular with everybody. Those rights are ancillary to the main goal of the Jewish state, which is to defend the Jewish people and be a protectorate for our family, for our tribe in this region. By the way, this is a tribal region, and we're a tribe, and our tribe has to protect our people. So what about minorities? In my mind, a non-jihadist, loyal minority has to have minimally, as was the law, civil rights and religious rights, and incredible opportunities for upward mobility and the liberties that the state of Israel guarantees. And a great example of that is the Druze. The Druze are a different kind of minority. They run the software of loyalty, not the software of jihad. And they do very, very well in Israel. They also vote. But when it comes to Arabs of the West Bank, of Judea and Samaria, I would immediately grant them residency. Residency is what you get. I got that when I moved to America as I was a kid. I was a resident for 7 years. You grant them residency, and you, of course, make sure that people are loyal, non-jihadists, pay their taxes, serve the country like everybody else, and they will get liberties. Now, the question is about voting. So when it comes to voting, there's different thoughts on it. Some people say, of course, what's even the question? Other people say, well, maybe they can vote back in the country that they actually, majority of them came from, which is Jordan. Let them stay as residents in Israel, but vote in the real Palestinian state next door, which is Jordan. Other people say, no, just like we're residents in Arab countries and they don't really give us those kind of rights. So too, if you want those kind of rights, self-determination, go to your countries. If you want to stay here, we can't let you take over the steering wheel because people vote us out of the country. We can't have that. So stay as residents, but with many rights and maybe some kind of representation, just like Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has representation in Congress, but they're non-voting congressmen in Congress. They don't vote for president. Okay, even the great democracy of the United States has systems to deal with other realities. In this case, the territory of Puerto Rico. Look, I'm saying we've got to figure it out. Now, I'm going to say something which is surprising. As a nationalist, what they call an Israeli right-winger, or whatever you want to call it, that's not the greatest word. In Israel, it's a good word. In America, it's not such a good word. But our idea is, we're the sovereign, and we must ensure that people living under our sovereignty live well, with opportunities, with liberties, and of course, with obligations and responsibilities. If you're anti-Israel, you're not going to get the liberties and the upward mobility that Israel brings. If you are loyal, if you're decent, if you accept that this is a Jewish state, but you want to be a proud Arab, Islam, Muslim, Palestinian minority living in a country not being seditious, then as we say, ahlan wa sahlan, mabruk, come live with us, and you're going to get the benefits of a great life. If not, you'll have to choose a different option.
Wonderful. Actually, we're now exactly at 8 o'clock p.m. Israel time. And I'm glad that we're closing on that optimistic and positive tone. I know these are tough challenges ahead for Israel, but Israel and the Jewish people throughout our long history have endured a great deal more. And with wonderful people such as you, Yishai, I'm sure that Israel is going to prevail and be strong. Thank you so much. It was riveting.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah Leah. And thank you, EMET. Keep on doing the great and amazing work that you guys are doing for not just for Israel, but for this region and for a stronger America as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.